Hello and welcome to the channel. Our channel is about collecting sort of diecast on a budget, and this is going to be the first proper official video into our new collection that we're going to be building, which is the Le Mans collection for cars from the 2000 to 2010. So we're going to call it the Noughties Le Mans collection. In front of us, we have the car that I showed you in a video earlier, which sort of launched what we're going to be doing with this particular collection, but I was never happy with that video, so I thought I would do a proper one. So in front of us, we have the car from the 2003 Le Mans 24 Hours. This is the car that would win the GTS class. The GTS class would later become what was known as GT1. Fortunately, GT1 sort of folded in the mid-2010s. I think the last few winners were probably the Corvette C7 and the DBR9. This car, though, was first in 2003 and 10th overall. It was driven by Peter Kox, Thomas Enge and Jamie Davies. The car was entered by Prodrive, or a team called Veloq. It says on the side there, Veloqx Prodrive, VELOQX Prodrive.com. So Prodrive were involved in the building of the Ferrari 550 GTS. It was originally called the Ferrari 550 GTO. Any of the cars built by Prodrive were originally going to be called that. They built 10 of the cars, but eventually it adopted the GTS moniker, which aligned with the class. Interestingly, though, Prodrive aren't the only ones who built Ferrari 550 GTS cars, and there were a number that were built for the French championships. Weitch, I think it's pronounced. Motorsport built some, which is Weitch. Again, my pronunciation could be terrible on that. The French cars were generally more based on road cars, whilst both the German or Dutch project and the Prodrive project were full-on race cars, if you like. They still used a chassis from Ferrari, but they would then develop them a lot further with wider bodies, basically re-engineer the whole car, if you like. So Prodrive were involved with this car. They also teamed up with Care Racing Development, which is a sponsor you can find on the bumpers here. Now, a lot of the chassis were then named after that. I believe this is chassis number 6. So this one came into existence, and from what I can work out, was first raced at Sebring in 2003. It looked like it spent most of its racing life over in America, racing in the ALMS. From what I can see, its notable result was the first at Le Mans in 2003. After that, I can't see any huge successes. When I looked on racingsportscars.com, which if you have never looked, brilliant website to go and have a look at anything to do with racing and motorsport. Fabulous information. You can get fastest laps, where cars qualified, even program pictures, media, posters, anything like that, to do a whole variety of events going back to the 1960s, maybe even further if I'm honest. So really recommend having a look there. So what have we got in front of us? This is the Altaya release. This was done as part of a magazine series for Ferrari racing cars. The model itself is a fairly decent representation. There are a few things that I'll point out that you could argue could be improved. But I got this model for just over £20, so the target of this collection is to try and get cars for less than £20. I'm going to add one a month as well. I'm going to do like I did with the Formula 1 collection, where I was buying loads of cars in bulk, and that way getting them under the £10 target. This one we're actually going to limit ourselves to £20 a month, so I might get 2 cars for £20, I might get 1 car for £20. And if one month I spend £15, the next month I spend £25 potentially. But I'm going to try and avoid deliberately saving money to go and buy a £40 Spark or something like that. The idea is very much this is geared towards those of us who are trying to collect cars but haven't got the money to stretch necessarily to some of the more expensive models. That doesn't mean to say those of you that are doing that, I don't recommend that you just constantly go for quantity over quality. If there's a car you really, really want, I actually do recommend that you save up, because as much as you can get some really good bargains and some budget-friendly alternatives, some of the high-end diecast that's out there will blow anything like this out of the water. There's some fantastic videos that a friend of mine, Mark Porthouse, has done on his collection, and he does collect more of the Spark and HPI brands like that, and you can start to see some of the quality differences that there are between some of these brands that are out there. Now, I do have some high-end stuff that I do collect. I also collect the old retro diecast, the old Solidos and Revs. I kind of feel like I almost save them from ending up in the bin, which is where a lot of them will end up as they get replaced by these much better models. But anyway, back to the budget collection. So this is budget 2000s Le Mans cars. Like I said, this is an important car because it's a class winner for 2003. The side collection we're going to have is to try and collect as many of the overall and class winners. I think I'm going to go for overall podium, top 3, and each class winner at least from every race. We'll see how we go. Is that possible with the budget we've got? Probably not, but we'll give it a go. So this is 2003 first in GTS. GTS being the top tier GT class. You had at the time LMP 900, which is where the Audi R8, not to be confused with the current now known R8, the Cadillac, the Panos raced. Then you had the LMP 675, which is where the little Lolas, Courage, things like that raced. Then you had GTS, which saw the Ferrari up against things like the Corvettes, C5, C6, and the Saleen S7R. You had the Ferrari 575, which would replace the 550, Aston Martin DBR9, Dodge Viper, cars like that raced in the GTS class. And then GT would be things like the Porsche 996 GT3 RS and RSRs, 360 Modenas, which would then later become known as GT2. This model is a fairly decent model. It's not the best model you're ever going to get of this car. If you're wanting to get one of the best ones, it's probably a BBR or a Redline. I'd actually go with a Redline. I think the BBRs look a little bit strange. So that's my recommendation if you want a high-end car. But as you can see, this is a very good representation. There are things that you can notice straight away you would not see on a Redline or a BBR. For example, how the roof scoop, I guess, it's mounted. It's obviously not quite flush with the rest of the body. These tow hooks are just decals. They're not actually a photo etch piece, which you probably would have on a Redline. The position circles here, these black dots, they would light up with what position the car's in. They are not got any depth, they are simply a sticker. The front grille is a nice representation, but again, it is just a textured piece of plastic that's in there. But overall, it is a fairly nice model of, well, a bright red Ferrari. Now, there's one thing that does bug me with this release, and that is I think they didn't have licensing from Le Mans, because we don't get the Le Mans board that would sit above the 88 here, which is a shame. But I'm going to buy a decal to finish that off, because I think it just looks... It doesn't look like a Le Mans car without the Le Mans number board, if you like. You can see there is an interior in there, and there are things picked up. So you've got seat belts. I can't tell if there are any dials. It looks like there might be something in there. I don't know if the camera's actually going to try and focus. There's something in there, definitely. Roll cage in silver. They have put the holes in the rear window as well to help with the cooling of the car. These could, I think, be a little bit better on the bonnet here, but it's difficult because you wouldn't necessarily make them... It's the same problem that people have with aircraft modelling. So panel lines on a 1/72 aircraft would not be visible. But if you remove them off your model and you don't try and... If they weren't there, it would just look too flat, boring. So they've obviously put the panel lines on a 1/72 scale aircraft. I'll just show you this scrapped Spitfire that I've got. So you can see all those panel lines to give it a bit of depth. You wouldn't probably actually be able to see that because in real life they are tiny on the actual aircraft, and scaled to 1/72 they just wouldn't work. I think you have the same thing with diecast, that sometimes to try and show some of these features, they end up either looking like they do on this, too flat and not quite right, or they end up taking over and it just looks, if it was scaled up, it would just look ridiculous. But anyway, this is a really cool model. I wanted to do a bit more of an in-depth review of this particular car and show it in a bit more detail, which hopefully you've been able to see in this video and tell you a little bit more about it. But overall, a really cool car. I like the yellow headlights as well. I think the GT1 cars all had yellow headlights. I'll have to double check that, but I believe they did, to differentiate from the other GTs. But yeah, really cool model. It's a red Ferrari. It's a front engine Ferrari. I do like the front engine Ferraris, which is something that obviously the 250 series was probably the most iconic of the front engine Ferraris, and the 550 kind of carried that legacy on, which is what I think they were trying to do when they originally said that this would be the 550 GTO, which is obviously Grand Touring Omologato. This one is actually now a 550 GTS, which is in relation to the GTS class. It was replaced by the 575, which I believe is a Michelotto car. Prodrive moved on to the DB9 project, and a lot of people thought that they basically put a DB9 body on what was the Ferrari. They did not. There's very little that they actually shared between the two cars. Obviously, both V12s, but different V12s, different gearboxes, different chassis. They probably took some of the things that they learnt with this car and developed it, with them both being quite heavy V12 front engine GTs, but they are very different cars. I have already got the next model that we'll be looking at, and it is a Mini Champs, and I scored it at a very, very good price. So I'm really looking forward to that arriving. I won't let out what it is, but I think it's pretty obvious. It's a Mini Champs, it's Le Mans. It is from the Le Mans prototype class. I think you'll all be able to work out what that is. So I look forward to that arriving. I have just noticed whilst looking at this, there is some slight strangeness going on here with the paint. There's like a black bit there, and above the window there is actually a little notch in the metal where it's been cast, which is a bit of a shame. But the black dot is there, so I'm guessing that's actually how the windscreen mounts in, looking at it. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what works with these videos, what you want to see less of, what you want to see more of, and I will catch you for a video soon. Cheers, bye.